They'd been unable to use it that day because Powell had put an embargo on it. But of course, when my mother read it, she was shocked. And it was the sight, I think, of words like grinning pickaninnies is clearly what upset my mother most of all. She said that there was no way that she could ever spend time with Enoch Powell again. My mother handed over the girls, and Powell said, well, that looks like the end of a very good friendship. And my mother said yes. So it was a real defining moment for my mother and father. I think this was the moment when they had to make a stand. It hurt them. I know that it probably hurt the Powells as well, but that was the moment in family history, a searing moment.
Meanwhile, footage of the speech was dispatched south. The bomb that Powell had primed was about to explode.
The tape plus the extracts from the speech, which I'd marked up for them, was put on a train to ITN in London. Who, of course, ran it big.
That evening, Powell's shadow cabinet colleagues watched in horror.
The black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
They were outraged by what they felt was his racist tone. Some threatened resignation if Powell wasn't sacked. Having had no warning of the speech, many felt betrayed.
Ted Heath was furious with Enoch Powell for saying something entirely different from what had been agreed. He would have acted even if the other colleagues had not insisted, but their insistence was absolutely in line with his own feeling.
I dismissed Mr. Powell from the shadow cabinet because I believed that his speech was inflammatory and liable to damage race relations in this country.
Heath had acted quickly. Powell was sacked on Sunday the 21st of April, just a day after the speech. Two days later, 1,000 dockers marched to Parliament to protest against what they called the victimization of Powell. White working people, traditionally core Labour supporters, were now backing a radical right-wing Tory. Meat porters from Smithfield Market in London added their voice to the growing chorus of support.
Enoch! How can you fetch more in when you haven't got enough housing, enough schools, the National Health Service is going to put over them? This is why we're doing it, because Enoch Powell spoke the truth, and he's been sacked for it. This race relation issue goes well beyond the field of politics and trade union matters. This is an issue of national importance, as important to us as Dunkirk. And what is the issue about? The issue is not coloured immigration, but the denial of free speech to us, the English, in our own land.
Enoch for Prime Minister!
I was frightened by the irrationality of it. I remember an interview with one of the dockers on television in which he said that dockers were tolerant and moderate people, but when our women are threatened, then we stand up. And I wanted to shout at the television and say, what do you mean about your women being threatened? Who's threatening your women? And I get a speech of Mr. Powell's force and drama and extremism stirred in all sorts of not very thinking people every imaginable sort of fear. And I remember thinking, if this docker thinks somehow his women are under threat, well, we are getting to a very dangerous situation indeed.
I was in Birmingham at the time, talking to West Indians about it. They were genuinely frightened. They thought, if he can say that, then it is a kind of invitation to people who hold racist opinions anyway to act on them. It certainly was a call to mobilization.
Don't just talk about London and the West Midlands. My constituency was in Devon, and the atmosphere there was absolutely electric. If Enoch Powell had stood to be leader of the Conservative Party, he'd have had a landslide at that weekend. And I dare say if he'd then stood to be Prime Minister, he would have had a national landslide. It was that dramatic, the degree of support and the intensity of it.
2,000 signatures in 2 days.
A letter to the press. 88% of Slough people say they support Enoch Powell. 88% Slough people.
Powell received 100,000 letters and 700 telegrams following his speech. Less than 1% challenged his views.
He wanted saying he was supporting the people he represented. He was put there by the people, and he also could only be took away by the people.
This is the first time we've had a champion. This is the first time we've had somebody to speak up for what the people, the working class people, think and feel to be right.
Opinion polls showed that up to 80% of those questioned agreed with Powell's comments about immigrants. 1 week after the speech, the Labour minister Dick Crossman wrote,
"We are still absolutely dominated by the effect of his Birmingham speech. He has stirred up the nearest thing to a mass movement since the 1930s, all part of a response to a very simple appeal: no more bloody immigrants in this country."
Anyone who dared oppose Powell's views faced a furious response. Powell's now ex-friend, the editor Clement Jones, tried to balance out the 5,000 letters in support of the speech which he received at the Wolverhampton Express and Star.
He was getting calls at home from people saying, "Is that the bloody nigger lover?" He was getting letters with used toilet paper, bricks through the window. I mean, my father and mother had made a stand. They'd made a stand.
The situation for immigrants and their families was no better.
I personally, and I think probably many other black people too, felt very uncomfortable, obviously, because then we became even more the object of a kind of racism that was legitimated in one sense by this speech. You didn't feel safe. There was that sense of, okay, the gloves are off.
I was in a school playground when people came up to me and said, "I heard what Mr. Powell had said." I remember vividly there was a long crocodile of children, every one of them, I suspect, black or at least Asian. And I thought, these are the people he's talking about. And I immediately thought of the damage this was going to do to them, that all over Britain, racism had suddenly been made respectable, because normally this sort of thing is said in the bars of the worst sort of public houses. But suddenly this was told by a man in pinstripe trousers, black jacket, Homburg hat. He was told by a respectable figure. That was my initial feeling, and it was why I hated him then and why I hate him now.
Powell now faced a backlash from those who passionately opposed his views. A cross-section of British society, from middle-class liberals to radical students, mobilised against him. Even the world's most famous pop group got in on the act, recording a song originally intended as a satire on Powell's views.